Hey everybody, welcome to Bullock's Rules for Writing. This is a new series. It's not a numbered series because it's not part of the sequence that I have going in some of the other stuff that I'm working on. But this is going to be a continuing occasional series about close reading strategies. If you've never heard of close reading, that's what this episode is about. Before we get very far though, I want to remind you, or if this is your first time ever seeing one of my videos, tell you for the first time that I produced an episode called Episode 0, which covers what I call the only rule you really need to know, which is that writers write what they write on purpose. I'm going to link right at the top of the description below to that episode. I highly recommend, if you haven't, go watch that one before you watch this one. Right now, though, the theme song. Close reading, what is it? And what are 6 things that are going to be true about just about every close reading strategy you employ? Well, that's what we're going to answer in this particular episode. And I'm going to start with the definition of close reading. It is rereading carefully to see how a text works. Now, it is true that back in my first series on analysis, I mentioned close reading, and I said the definition was reading carefully to figure out how a text, and instead of rereading. But I do want to stress that most of the time, when you are engaging in close reading, whether you're doing it because you know you have to get a particular assignment done, or you found a text that you really love and you want to spend a lot of time with it, or whatever other reason you might be close reading. Maybe, you know, very specifically in English class, you were handed a passage and you were told, close read this. You should be doing a reread when you close read. You should read first to kind of get the gist, get the feel. What is this text about? What are some basic things about the text, like its general tone, or any overriding strategies or other things that I see popping out at me immediately. The close read is the reread, to really unpack it, to really figure out what the author has put in there that makes it work the way it does. In this series, I'm going to throw a lot of things at you. A lot of them will be acronyms, because you know how I feel about acronyms, or maybe you don't, and I've just embarrassed myself and you don't want to watch the rest. But please do watch the rest of this video. It's going to be a lot of things like getting you to ask why questions. Why is this here? Why this other technique? You know, you have to ask a lot of why when you're doing a close reading, and you want to look very closely for patterns. One of the best ways to analyze an author's work is to pick up on 1 or 2 or 3 patterns and then look for where the patterns get broken. That's a pretty awesome thing to do. I'm an English teacher. I know what I am talking about. And when a student comes to me with an analysis and points out where an author breaks a pattern and I've never noticed it before myself, it blows my mind. And that student is my favorite student for the rest of the day. So why questions and patterns? The upcoming episodes, I'm going to give you things like graphic organizers or other strategies that you can employ for yourself. Your teacher may have some specific ones that they want you to do. But what I want to cover for the rest of this episode is 6 things that should be front and center for you every time you do one of those close reads. And every one of these 6 things is a different way of addressing why the author has written what they have written, because rule number 0, the only rule you really need to know, is that writers write what they write on purpose. And you've got to have a little bit of faith when your English teacher hands you a thing to read and says, you've got to analyze it. You have to have some faith that that thing is worth reading and worth analyzing. I mean, the most immediate filter that it went through to get to you is your English teacher, but your English teacher found it published somewhere, which means it went through an editing process, and there were multiple layers of people looking at it before it went out into the world, and the author, him or herself, probably wrote many drafts of it and shared it with friends, trusted advisors, families, agents. So writers have written what's on that page on purpose. It has been worked over, it has been crafted, it has been delicately arrayed in the way that it is, and you can only honor that by doing a close reading where you keep these 6 things in mind. Constant number 1, when you are doing a close reading, you should go slow. You might think that this is a bit paradoxical, because if a close reading is your second reading, you should be able to do it faster. Not so. You're reading for a completely different reason this second time through. The first time, as I said, is to get the gist, to get the feel. So your second reading should be slower. If it helps, you can actually take your pen or your pencil and you can, sort of follow, from your point of view, it would be this way, follow the words on the page as you are reading them. So your brain really has to stop and consider the specific words. And then, of course, your pen is right there if you want to do some annotation. Constant number 1, go slow. Close reading constant number 2, go with the flow. Yeah, just a moment ago I talked about how you need to have a little bit of faith that this thing your teacher has given you is worth reading, worth rereading, worth spending a lot of time on and worrying about and staying up all night the night before it is due because you procrastinated too long, you were playing your video game or you were on the Facebook or whatever it is you kids do these days. I don't know, I'm old. You are still going to approach a lot of texts with, oh, I hate this, or, oh, I disagree with this so much, or I can't understand a word of it, and you're going to want to fight the text. It's good to have questions about the text, but close reading doesn't work if you fight the text, if you're saying no, no, no over and over again to the text. You've got to go with the flow and follow the text to where the author is trying to lead you. Fighting is only going to make it worse. You're not going to understand what the author is really trying to say, and you're definitely not going to get into how the text works, the things that the author does to get those ideas across. Constant number 3, go bravo. Even when you're fighting the text, your instinct is to fight the text, even when your instinct is to hate the text, even when the teacher who assigned you this text is the worst teacher you have ever had, and you just, every time you're in class, you wish you could just lay back and die because it is so awful. There's going to be something in that text that impresses you. If you're not prepared for that, then you're not going to notice it. And so, I am a writer, and I'm not saying this because I'm a writer and I want praise. I'm saying this because I'm an English teacher, and I have been for years, and I see students who never acknowledge that anything in a text that they've been asked to analyze is any good at all. So if you approach a close reading with the mindset of going bravo, that you are going to look for, on purpose, specifically, some things that the author does well or things that the author does that impresses you, then you're going to be much more successful with your close reading and your analysis afterwards. Close reading constant number 4, go below. And this is basically just a way of saying that over the years I've taught hundreds of students who either refused or didn't understand to see that there's a subtext to the text. I mean, the text is here, but there's more to that. There's something underneath the text. And when you're doing a close reading, as I said, you're reading to figure out how the text is working. You might kind of imagine taking apart a toaster. You want to go beyond the surface of the toaster to see the whatever it is on the inside that makes the toast. I assume it's little tiny guys with blowtorches, and when you're not using your toaster, they're just sitting there on their phones. But you go below. An example, okay? The famous William Carlos Williams poem, "So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens," okay? William Carlos Williams didn't write that poem to say, "Holy cow, look at this wheelbarrow." He was trying to say something more than that. And if you aren't prepared to look below the surface of that poem, you're never going to find it. Close reading constant number 5, go, although. Now I get it. You're in high school. You don't have an awesome beard like this. But the point of this is not to sit there and stroke your chin. The point of this is to imagine, what would this text have been like if the author had chosen to do the opposite of what the author actually did? Often when I'm working with students, I call it imagining the counterfactual. You imagine this text in a way that is not true. What if James Baldwin, instead of writing a letter to his 15-year-old nephew, had written a letter to President Kennedy or to Santa Claus? What if The Hunger Games was written in the first person? Well, we would all know that Katniss wasn't going to die because she would be the one telling the story, and you can't have a narrator who dies before the end of the book. What if Lincoln had said, we need a people first government instead of a government of the people, by the people, for the people? What if this author had only spoken literally about the subject instead of dropping in this metaphor? Imagining the counterfactual, thinking about what the text would be like if it were the opposite of what the writer really did, is an excellent way of figuring out how the text really works. You can begin to understand the effectiveness of the techniques the author did choose. And finally, close reading constant number 6. Go, I don't know. There will be parts of a text that you are reading and close reading and rereading and re-close reading and rereading that you don't get. And I'm not just talking about you don't know what that word means, but you don't understand why the author chose that technique at that point in the text. You don't get what the author was trying to do. And you know what? That is okay, right? People are still arguing over the plays of Sophocles, and they're all 2,500 years old. People are still arguing over whether or not Shakespeare intended Hamlet to be literally crazy for the entire play, or just acting crazy for most of the play. People are still arguing over the series finale of How I Met Your Mother, which wasn't that bad, guys. Come on, just let it go. What I'm saying is, you don't have to understand every inch of the text. But part of what saying "I don't know" means, or allows you to do, is then concentrate on the areas where you do understand. Because if you can isolate and just limit the parts of a text that you're close reading to, that you don't understand, if you can just sort of keep those in separate and distinct places and you know where those are, then you have the entire rest of the text to talk about. And you can even get into the things that you don't know. The author did this here, which might mean X, it might mean Y, it might even mean Z. As an English teacher, I like to read those kinds of paragraphs from students because it shows me that they're thinking, that they're processing what it is that they are reading. The ability to admit as a reader that you don't fully understand an author's intent, but here are some possible guesses, like that is a beautiful thing in a student writing, a student essay. So don't be afraid to say "I don't know," and in fact, do say "I don't know," because it will help you a lot. All right, thanks for checking in on this first episode about close reading. As I said, the other episodes will be providing you some specific close reading strategies so that when you have that as an assignment, here's something that you can try in order to boost your understanding. So I will see you for the next one.